Another way that we started to have these dialogues on campus was through an exhibit, Aboriginal Unhistory Month, that I collaborate with my colleagues, Amy Perot from CTLT, that's the Center for Teaching, Learning and Technology. She'll be speaking later with Janie Liu, as well as Pam Brown from the Museum of Anthropology. We collaborate on something that is kind of new. It's an exhibit every year in the Irving K. Barbary Learning Center. And we do it in a way every year to respond to a dialogue that should be happening on campus. And so in 2014, we dedicated it to the conversation of Indian residential schools. And through this and other activities, we started to talk about truth and reconciliation in the library. So the calls to action have called upon Library and Archives Canada to do certain things. And I'm so heartened to see a response that is much broader than just Library and Archives Canada. I'm so grateful that you are all here. I'm grateful that the doors have been opened, as Paulette said earlier, because it makes it an easier conversation to have when it's more than just the two Aboriginal librarians in a large library system trying to make an upward force, especially when we're not at senior administrative levels. So trying to project the ideas and the need for an enhanced awareness, it's so much easier now thanks to the survivors who have shared their stories, thanks to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It's just so heartening that we can do this work together. So what are we doing at the very micro level of UBC libraries? We're starting to do a collections review and look towards enhanced metadata. So what does that mean? It means that one of the first questions that we were asked when the Residential School History and Dialogue Center was coming about was, what are your collections at UBC libraries that have to do with residential schools? And because it's approached from all disciplines, it's an interdisciplinary topic that's been approached. There are collections throughout the library, so knowing how to identify where these materials are was one of the first questions that we were asked. And a way that we're going to be able to do this better and provide better access to our students and faculty is through enhanced metadata. The First Nations House of Learning subject headings is one way that we're going to do that, and I'm so grateful for my colleagues here from UBC Library. Thank you for the work that you're doing to support this work. We're also on the verge of launching an Aboriginal Community Access Card. So UBC libraries have always provided access to Musqueam community members to our collections, but we're expanding that to any self-identified Aboriginal person who would like access to borrow our materials. This is courageous. It's unsettling for libraries. It's a wonderful thing, and I'm really excited that we can open that door and really respond in that way. We have a couple of housekeeping things still to do on that, and right now we are looking forward to really working with Musqueam to make sure that the former protocols that we used in doing the access for that card are still done in a way that they approve of in terms of the self-identification piece. We're also starting to recognize that staff training, something that I've been asking for a long time, staff training is really important because of the proximity of the Residential School History and Dialogue Center to the libraries, and because of the role of our work with public services. It's important that all frontline staff have a foundational understanding of what questions might come to them at the reference desk. I'm really grateful for the work of CTLT and of the First Nation Studies faculty in particular, who've put together an amazing resource that I think they're going to talk about a little bit later. But it's the Indigenous Foundation's website, and having all of our staff be able to refer to something online for students who are approaching this topic from a first inquiry is really important. And it gives us a sense of, it gives us a bit of safety in terms of public services staff having something authoritative to refer to. So this website is really helpful in that sense. Recently, the UBC Libraries received an Equity Enhancement Fund grant, and we hope to develop a workshop that will be library specific, and hopefully something that we can share out to other libraries across Canada on how to have a good understanding of resources available to talk about Indian residential school topics in their practice. So examples of engagement and programming and enhanced public services, these are other ways that we're responding to the TRC calls to action. Indigitization is a program that has been run out of the Irving K. Barber Learning Center for the last 4 years, pardon me. And I think this is a really good example of an unsettling practice because it's a grant program that doesn't require that people in communities make their materials digitized and available online. It recognizes that not all knowledge is meant for everybody. There are cultural materials that are not meant to be publicly shared, but are still vital to communities in their efforts around language revitalization, in their efforts around traditional land use studies. This knowledge is really important, and it needs to be digitized and it needs to be preserved, but making it accessible isn't in the cards right now, and that's okay, and I'm glad to be part of that program. I mentioned Aboriginal and History Month a little bit earlier, so I won't talk about that right now because I think we're running out of time. But I will mention that along those lines, another example of unsettling practice is archival court collections that we have just acquired at UBC Libraries. And right now, they're not publicly available, and we really have to work with the communities who gave those collections to us to figure out what can be made publicly available. But these are physical records, and they take resources to care for. And I'm really, really glad that UBC Libraries has committed to those resources long term while we negotiate what is public and what is not. Finally, providing enhanced navigation while we work on enhancing access via metadata and subject headings are items such as research LibGuides. And I think some of you had a chance to pick this up at the beginning, but this is an example of the Indian Residential Schools in Canada LibGuide that Waiwa Library has worked on. So it's a good start here for those looking to access collections about residential schools. So that's what the research guide looks like. Okay. Finally, working together as information professionals, I think, is going to be key. I want to give a shout out to UNBC's archivist, Erica Hernandez-Reed, who was recently appointed the chair of the Canadian Archival System Truth and Reconciliation Commission Report Response Task Force. That's a mouthful. And I think is indicative of a lot of the work that is going to happen as part of that task force. So I think figuring out how we can work together to break down the silos of what we as information professionals do, the synergies that we bring together to this national conversation, I think is going to be important. We will learn things applicable to both archival and library practice that we can share with each other. In closing, I wanted to share this photograph that I took at the National Research Centre at the University of Manitoba. This is a photo of a residential school and a brick from that residential school. And at the bottom of the case is medicine. And in every display that they have at this research center, they've placed medicine. The National Research Center's director, I broke the mic.
Take mine.
Thank you. I twisted it. The National Research Center's director, Rai Moran, who's also Métis, he reminds us that the preservation of this collection is a sacred obligation. We will preserve these records so that at no point in the future can people question what happened at the residential schools, so that we all may remember what we are capable of, both good and bad, and so that we never forget the courage, the strength, and the determination of the children that went through the residential school system. Okay. That's it for me.